Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Jamie Rathjen. Super excited today because this is our Get to Know Jamie episode. And Jamie is somebody that I know somewhat well, but not super well. So I'm excited to learn more about Jamie because our relationship really is growing on this podcast. And I want to understand how she got to be so passionate about holistic women's health. So Jamie, give us an overview of how you came into being so passionate about women's feminine design and the beauty and the dignity of women.
Sure, I would love to. Well, I'll first start off by sharing that I'm from Iowa. So married, 3 kids. My husband and I have been married for 10 years. And so super excited about that. I'm a fertility care practitioner, which if you've been listening to our earlier episodes, we went through an overview of the fertility cycle. So I'm a practitioner, so I teach couples to understand their fertility, whether they're avoiding or achieving pregnancy. So I'm a fertility care practitioner. I'm the founder and former executive director of Guiding Star Cedar Valley as well. And so I'm very excited, and most professional things I do really are focused and centered around the dignity of the feminine design. I also have a business called FIATfem. And in this little get to know Jamie, I'm going to talk more about that word, fiat. It's like you know how we have like a life verse or a mantra or something that kind of anchors us and grounds us in life? For me, it's a one word, and it's the word fiat. So I'm going to share a little bit more about that word as we move into this Get to Know Jamie episode.
Which I love that word, fiat. And I love your story. That was one of the first stories you told me about yourself, Jamie, was how that word really spoke to you and how you didn't even know necessarily what it meant for you or kind of the meaning of the word. And I just thought that was so beautiful. Okay, so you're from Iowa, I'm from Nebraska, so we're not too far from each other, but tell me about, again, how did you start kind of getting interested in, the woman's cycle even, and how did this all begin to fascinate you?
Totally. So growing up, I was very fascinated just by people in general. So I remember being at Mass and just like looking at everyone at church and being like, what's their favorite color? Where did they go to college? I wonder what they did 10 years ago for their job. Like I was always curious about like humanity, but individual people. And so growing up, I was just, again, very fascinated by that. But what's so sad as I look back to it now, and maybe some of our listeners can really relate to this, I couldn't see any giftedness in me. I was always very fascinated by others. And growing up, I just, as you enter into high school and college, you're always asking yourself, what did God make me for? What am I meant to do in this life? Especially into college, you really start figuring that out. So again, I'd meet people and I'd always be so fascinated knowing that there's no one else like them. I will never meet the same person twice. It's impossible. And just how we are just made with just this unique identity. So this fascination would follow me into, the high school, college, and then afterward. But in college, again, I'm really soul searching. Again, maybe some of you guys can really relate to me. I could just never figure out what I wanted to do for a major. Like I changed my major so many times that I graduated with a general studies major, which is a fancy way of saying like you never had a major, because I changed my major so many times. It's crazy. So I knew I liked the body. I was fascinated by like biology and anatomy, and I just loved physiology and that sort of thing. And so what I did know for sure is I loved to run. Like I ran track at UNI, the University of Northern Iowa. And so, I kind of put the major, like the decision to figure out what I wanted to do with my life in the back burner. So while I graduated with general studies, I actually had another year of eligibility in track. So it gave me some extra time to really think about what I wanted to do.
Not bad.
Yeah. So
I love that we're both athletes too.
You know what? That's something I learned about you too, that you played soccer.
Yeah, it's good. Good athletic people. That's good.
Yep. Hard workers. Right, Teresa?
That's right.
So ran track. I was really obsessed with running. Like if you were to see me on campus as a college student, normally like in college, girls are thinking about like looking cute and like hair nice and cool little earrings, accessories. I didn't really care about that. I would wear running clothes on like the little off chance I might want to sprint to the library or to my dorm room. I would run everywhere. People probably thought I was always late to class, but I just loved to run. So all I knew, I loved to run, couldn't figure out my major. My senior year, or actually it was my, I guess, graduated my like last year, I tore my Achilles during the middle of a baton exchange. And like,
ouch.
It was terrible. And so like my whole future, my whole past, my future, you know, in the movies when your whole thing flashes before your eyes, I knew right in that moment my track career was over. So I was forced to figure out, what am I going to do? Because I could run, but that isn't going to like help me move on with life. So decided to get my master's degree in community health education. And at the time I was engaged to be married, and my husband and I were talking about like the future and our future family and all these things. And I told my husband, I said, at the time he was my fiance, I said, I never want me being pregnant when we're married to be bad news, ever. Like I never want to think, because you know when people get married right away, and this is fine, everyone makes their own choice, but for me personally, I wanted to be open to life at the beginning. We were trying to avoid, but I never wanted it to be bad news.
Yeah.
You know, and so my husband and I, and fiance at the time, I told him, I'm like, I'm going to study fertility awareness-based methods for my community health degree. And really my community health degree was a stepping stone. I thought I wanted to be an occupational therapist. So at the time I was like doing this in the midst. And so what I realized as I was studying fertility awareness-based methods or fertility tracking systems is that they're amazing. And it fed into this like this idea and this thought that we don't need to alter ourselves to feel fully alive. So, you know, I'm in college and there's people using, you know, birth control for their, you know, hormonal contraception for birth control and things like that. And I just felt like, you know, there has to be something that helps couples avoid pregnancy. Again, my husband and I were preparing for marriage, and we actually did wait for our wedding night to actually have intercourse for the first time, which I'm telling the whole world that, but it is such a beautiful thing.
That is.
Yeah, it was so beautiful. And so really convicted about this. So I started learning about the truths of our reproductive cycle. And a lot of what I had learned was not anything I'd learned as a community health master's student ever. And so I started getting really excited about the effectiveness and the safety of systems that don't impede conception. And I'll talk about that in just a second. That don't impede or alter our mood, our essence, the way in which God made us to be. Because Teresa, remember, I'm like so fascinated by people. So to alter a person, to alter the mood or the essence or the being of a person, to me would just be a travesty, because people are so fascinating. I don't want to alter them. And I just realized that women didn't realize that that's what was happening when they were using birth control. And so I started studying this whole concept, and it really lit my heart on fire.
That's amazing. I don't think I would have been so intuitive at that age in college of seeing birth control as altering kind of the essence of somebody. But it's true. And of course, you know, women might not feel that way, but it is such a hormonal change that occurs, and our hormones are so much a part of us. So I really think that is intuitive of you to kind of see that at that age. So that's really cool, Jamie.
Yeah. And something I was floored by really was, again, this was all spurred on by my own soul searching, or my own searching for my husband and I, like how can we plan our family when we're married? So that's, again, the reason why I chose that topic. So it started off as like a mild conviction and turned into a full-fledged passion. So the things that I learned about birth control that I just felt like no one really learned about, it has three main functions, three main ways of working. So the first one is to keep a woman from ovulating. The second one is to thicken the cervical mucus so that sperm cannot penetrate or enter into the cervical canal. And then the third way is to thin the uterine lining. And so depending on the dose of hormone, depending on what type of birth control you use, depends on which one of those three things are most at play. But the fact that a newly conceived human being, that moment of conception where unique DNA is formed. That person will be tall, they'll be short, they'll be funny, they'll be quiet, or they'll be more shy, they'll be artistic, they'll be musical, they'll be athletic. Like that decision, that moment, that DNA, that moment of conception is so, to me, like fascinating and holy, that I could not even believe that conception could be happening and implantation may not be, because the uterine lining is thin. Some people may say, well, ovulation, birth control, one of the 3 functions, you just said it, Jamie, is to keep a woman from ovulating. And while that is true, if a woman is on a low dose of hormones, the fertility cycle, or that feedback between the pill and the ovaries, it's not as strong. So the brain has some maybe work that's kind of communicating to the ovaries. So there could be some things that ovulation could happen if those synthetic hormones aren't high, like, or not, enough of them.
Well, and the way that I explain that this is possible, Jamie, is that I usually, if there's a big group of people I'm talking to, I'll have people raise their hand and say, how many people here know someone who got pregnant on the pill, on the birth control pill? And like a lot of people know someone who got pregnant on the pill. So that's kind of, because it's hard to say, like, when you talk about this, like, well, how do you know that's happening?
Yep.
Well, we know that's happening because people actually get pregnant on the pill, so that we know that there are spontaneous ovulations. But this fact that it thins that uterine lining is very evident, and they've researched that and looked at that lining. And so we know that there's a possibility that that baby couldn't implant inside the uterus.
Absolutely. I always think back to, too, I'm like, so as a Christian woman, again, I think about just the dignity of our nature, the purpose of our feminine nature, the purpose of masculine nature, the purpose of all of us as individuals. And I think about how we are made in the image of God. And we don't just image God, or we don't just mirror Jesus after we're born. We mirror Jesus even in his tiniest moment, And so even before implantation, that's still, a dignified person. They're just at the tiniest form. And so again, spiritually, because again, wellness of the body is body, mind, soul, spirit. So spiritually, that was a huge convicting moment for me too, is just knowing that. So that, and then also in my paper, I realized that, and learned a lot more about how the 5 systems I studied are very effective, or I learned about some systems are not as effective as others, but there are systems that are effective at avoiding and achieving pregnancy without hormones, without barrier methods. It just is understanding the natural fertility signs. The second thing I learned is that doctors didn't learn about this in med school. Most doctors never learn about this. The third thing I learned is that these systems are safe. So those are the 3 main things I learned. So I, again, convicted, mild curiosity just for our own marriage, get the master's out of the way and then move on and do something else like occupational therapy. But I could not stop thinking about this. Like, it was in my mind all the time. I would, like, if I went and took a bathroom break, or I was strolling the aisles of Target, I would be like giving this grand talk in my mind. I have to tell the world. I knew what I was saying. Like, I had my talking points, and I was, it's like the world needs to know this. So I was just on fire, but I was frustrated because I just learned about how doctors don't really believe this stuff is actual legitimate, just through my research. I just learned that a pill is scientific. Your physical body is not. And so scientific means pill or something external, and non-scientific is internal or from the body. That's typically how we view science, or something we trust, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
And it's not the fault of medical providers at all. It's because in med school, it's never really taught. And so if there was no formation for the medical professional as they grew up, then that's where that's where the gap lies. So I was frustrated because I thought there's no hope for me in this sort of work, like who would hire me? There's not really like a job where somebody could do fertility awareness, education, fertility tracking. What am I to do? So I didn't think really I could do anything much like it. But then I learned about the awaken method. I learned about being a fertility care practitioner and how doctors are trained in this system and how they work with fertility care practitioners. And as a matter of fact, they can't even do their job without fertility care practitioners. And so I decided to go get trained to become a fertility care practitioner. And that's really when things started to refine themselves in regards to my opinion of myself. I didn't have a huge, sense of confidence about, what God put me on earth to do. But when I started learning about the dignity of our feminine nature and the effectiveness of these systems, and that you don't need to alter your body, and that you don't need to impede that holy moment of conception by just simply cooperating with your fertility cycle, understanding natural times of fertility and avoiding or achieving based on that. It's like a win-win. And so
you came to Omaha. So you came to my town.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and just so the listeners know, so I'm also trained in Creighton model, and I was actually a fertility care practitioner too. I taught the Creighton model for, I think, 8 years. And then after having many babies, I decided to give that part up and just focus on the medical aspects of NAPRO technology. But you're right. I mean, what's so cool is that when you see medical providers mind blown by the same thing you're mind blown by, like they didn't know. I mean, you're in a room with a bunch of doctors, and you don't have to be a medical professional to become a practitioner, but you're all in this room together learning about this incredible information about the woman's cycle and her body, and they're just as mind blown as you are. You're like, wow, okay, this is just not information that's given to medical professionals, and it could help so many people to know this because it's very scientific. Like anybody who goes through the Creighton model training knows you spend a lot of time in lectures, very heady and very medical. So it's a lot of, and by the end of it, the non-medical people are like, oh my gosh, this is the biggest exam I'm ever going to take in my life, So they get very, very trained in that. That's awesome. So you become a practitioner, and now you're like, I have the tools, and now I have the education to basically take this passion of mine and to use it, and maybe even get paid for it.
Yes.
As well.
That's the thing, guys. So if any of you are listening and you're like, my heart burns with the desire to do what these ladies are doing, please reach out to us because we can get you connected. Because there are ways that you can influence and impact others to live fully alive within themselves. So I'm in the training, I'm at Omaha, and my mind is being blown and my soul is being fed, and like all these people are like just so convicted too. And it was beautiful. It was like an alternate reality. Mm-hmm. I loved it so much. And so while I was getting trained, I was like in this discernment mode because I didn't know at the time, between the time of like master's paper and this current moment that I'm explaining, I had gotten a full-time job, and it was like this, like, I don't know if you guys have ever like experienced this feeling, but like, is God calling me out of a stable job? I like the job. There's nothing wrong with the job. But I feel maybe called out of that. And if I am called out of a stable full-time job into basically a thing where you have no idea what's coming, it's your own job, you have to find your own clients. At that point, I was all by myself. I didn't have a doctor that I was connected with. And so I was discerning my guts out, Teresa, my guts. I'm like, every organ, I was like, pleading with the Lord, please give me direction. That's crazy, this thought of just quitting my job and dedicating my whole life to being a mouthpiece for this. But God, please help me. So I'm getting trained, praying my guts out, every single organ. And one night I'm laying in bed because, and I'm just tossing and turning. I can't shut my head off. I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I'm, 4 hours away from my newborn daughter and my husband. I'm thinking about quitting my job. Like, that's crazy. What are you doing? And I was also thinking, but I really feel called to this. And earlier in the day, we took a business basics sort of class, and they were asking what you need to think of a name for your center. Because as a fertility care practitioner, it's a business now. So you have to have a business name. What's the name of your center? So all these thoughts were rolling in my head. I'm thinking, why am I here? I am scared. And also, what should I call my center? So I'm thinking, and I'm laying in bed, and I finally retreat. And then in a moment, a word enters my mind, and it was fiat. And I thought, fiat. And at the time, we didn't have smartphones, because I would have just looked up the meaning right then and there. And it was fiat, and kept repeating fiat, fiat, fiat. I'm like, fiat. I didn't know what that word meant, besides like it was a car. So I thought to myself, Lord, are you answering my question of what I should call my center? Fiat Fertility Care Center. Ah, thanks, Jesus. So I wrote it down on a piece of paper, set it at my bedside so I could look up the actual meaning of the word. But I knew it was supposed to be called Fiat Fertility Care Center. Wake up the next day, I look up the word fiat, and fiat means let it be done. Let it be. And it was Mary's response to the angel Gabriel when he came to ask her to be the mother of Christ. And she said, fiat voluntas tua, which means let it be done to me according to thy will.
Wow.
And so in that moment, I realized he was not just giving me the name of a center. He was asking me, he was inviting me to say fiat and to trust him.
Wow.
Because I was struggling. And right after that moment, I felt God telling me, or almost assigning me to, you will teach other people and other women to say fiat for their will, for their life, but also as that applies to their feminine nature, fiat to their womanhood, fiat to their children, because Mary said fiat and it changed the course of the world forever. So our fiats can change the course of the world, and it does, but we can't say yes to our feminine nature when we change the essence of who we are. You know, we can't fully say yes, but the thing is, women don't know that's what they're doing. And so Teresa and I feel called to educate women. How do we say yes? You know, FIATfem, which is a business name of mine, with speaking in natural tools and essential oils and teaching other women to actually also say yes and teach others to do the same. FIATfem, yes to your feminine nature. That's the reason for that name. And so that one word changed the whole course of my whole life. So even in my own family, you know,
Wow.
so, yeah.
That's beautiful. I love it. That is so beautiful, Jamie. And I mean, what an example of just, again, being able to say yes to something. And even though you had no idea what was going to happen, right, and you had no idea if things were going to work out. Mm-hmm. And that's a really scary position to be in. But man, we can all learn from that word.
Totally.
You know, we can just all, again, accept that we are called because we all have gifts, beautiful gifts that we can offer to the world. But if we don't say yes to the gifts that we have and then sharing them with others, and, you know, we're not using that and we're not changing the world.
Right.
So that was a beautiful witness to be able to say, you can do this, women out there. You can have a fiat moment.
Yes.
You can say yes to what your unique, beautiful, feminine powers are, and you can share those with the world.
Absolutely. So I knew right then and there that I was going to quit my job and started Fiat Fertility Care Center in my basement, and then got connected with a doctor who at first thought I was crazy. I had never talked to him before in my life, but someone gave me his name. And so I went and sat with him. His name's Dr. Robert Pranger, and sat with him. And I said, hey, I'm a fertility care practitioner. Can I use your space instead of my basement? He's like, sure. I said, have you ever thought about, you know, not prescribing birth control and getting trained as a NAPRO doctor? And he was kind of stunned. He didn't know that was even an option. And so a week later, he texted me. Again, I had just met this man. I just really felt called. I knew that if he said no, it was okay, because there was going to be a doctor that was going to help. I didn't have any fear. Normally, I would be like a worrier. I didn't have one fear at all. I just knew he's not it, moving on to the next one. But he said yes. A week later, strange woman comes in, please do this. So he changed the whole course of his practice, stopped prescribing birth control. And guess what, Teresa? He changed his whole practice name to Fiat Family Medicine.
Wow.
Just one word.
See, already, like in a short amount of time, look what that changed in the course of history there. Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. So that's how Teresa and I know each other is through our work with pro-life authentic women's healthcare, Guiding Star project is I founded and was, again, the former director of a Guiding Star Center, which really encompasses the feminine nature in fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum, and then also understands the value and the wholeness of a family unit. And so that's, again, how Teresa and I know each other. But, you know, my favorite quote, and this is how I'll end my portion here, is, you know, Saint Irenaeus says, and I said this earlier, you know, the glory of God is man fully alive. And I think about that all the time. Like the glory of God, not just like, oh, God likes it, fine, or, you know, it's good to like be fully alive. No, it's the glory of God to be fully alive. And so if I can help women find that and to be fully alive, and to know that there are tools, if women are on the pill, they feel like they need to be because of a gynecological problem or irregular cycles, or they have acne all over their face, and it's the only thing that helps, whatever the case may be, that there is a natural alternative. There are ways to help us address that, and that you can live fully alive then. You know, you don't have to alter yourself. And then also that we can understand and appreciate the holiness and to protect that purpose of that newly conceived life, that we do not need to alter that moment either. And that we can use natural systems to avoid pregnancy naturally, where you're not having intercourse during your fertile time, you're not having to interrupt any of that, and that you can really understand the dignity of that moment and to participate in that moment fully by understanding that we don't need to alter ourselves.
Awesome. So it really gets to the heart of everything for women, for men, for families.
Totally.
It's about our origin, it's about our purpose, it's about our destiny. And, you know, Jamie and I, we just want to help people get to that place, that deep place where healing can happen, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, because this is where people can, again, say yes and can learn to find themselves, change the world. And yeah, so that's super beautiful. Jamie, thank you so much for letting us get to know your heart, your passions, more about you. I'm excited in future episodes to learn more, because I know you have so many great stories to tell. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Teresa. And just be sure to follow us on Facebook, YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe so that you can share all of this amazing information with your friends. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram. We thank you so much for your support, and we look forward to chatting with you more later.